Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's episode. I'm Emma, and I'm here with Max. Today, we're going to talk about something really important if you want to improve your English fluency, how to think in English. Right, Max?
Absolutely, Emma. I think this topic is perfect for people who are learning English and want to speak more naturally. You know, thinking in English can make everything easier. When you stop translating in your head from your native language, your speech becomes faster and more natural, but it's not always easy to do that, is it?
No, it's not. I remember when I first started learning another language. It was so hard not to translate every word. I kept thinking in my native language, and it slowed me down. But once I started thinking in the new language, it became so much more comfortable to speak and understand.
Yes, and that's the point. So if you're always translating, it's like driving a car with the brakes on. You can move forward, but it's slow and feels like a struggle. When you think directly in English, you can communicate faster and smoother.
Exactly. But how do you start thinking in English? This is something many learners ask about. And the good news is, there are ways to train your brain to think in English. One simple way is to start with small things in your daily life. For example, when you're looking at things around your home, try to name them in English.
That's a great tip. It can be as simple as looking at a chair and saying in your mind, chair, or when you're eating breakfast, think I'm having toast and coffee. This might feel strange at first, but it helps your brain get used to English words.
Exactly, and the more you practice it, the easier it gets. It's like building a muscle. At first it's hard, but over time, it becomes natural. Another tip is to describe what you're doing throughout your day in English. For example, if you're brushing your teeth, you can think, I'm brushing my teeth now, or I'm walking to work.
Yes, I think this is a really powerful way to practice. It helps you focus on using the language all the time, even when you're alone. And it's okay if you don't know every word at first. You can always try to use simple words and phrases. For example, if you don't know the word for vacuum cleaner, you can just think, I clean the floor until you learn the right word.
That's a really good point, Max. Don't worry about being perfect. The important thing is to try and use the words you know. And if you don't know a word, you can learn it later. Another idea is to use pictures to help you think in English. You can look at a photo and try to describe it in English. What do you see? Who is in the picture? What's happening?
Yes, and that's something you can do with your phone. You can take a picture of anything, like your lunch, a building, or a park, and then describe it in English. What colors do you see? What objects are there? This kind of exercise trains your brain to think in the language without needing to translate.
I love that idea, and you don't need a teacher or a friend to practice this. You can do it anytime, anywhere. Another thing I think is really helpful is listening to English as much as possible. You know, when you listen to English podcasts, music, or even watch TV shows, your brain starts to get used to how English sounds and how sentences are built. Over time, you'll find it easier to think in English because it feels more natural.
That's so true, and it's not just about listening to difficult or complicated things. Even if you watch a simple TV show or listen to a basic podcast, it helps your brain get familiar with the language. Try to focus on the meaning, not just the words. Ask yourself, what are they talking about, instead of translating every single word.
Yes, exactly. I remember when I was learning, I watched cartoons because the language was easier. It really helped me start thinking in the language without getting stuck on hard vocabulary.
That's a great tip. Simple shows or even children's books can be a really good way to start thinking in English, especially if you're at an elementary or intermediate level. You don't have to dive into advanced material right away. Start simple, and gradually, your mind will adjust to thinking in English.
Definitely, and don't forget, it's important to be patient with yourself. Learning to think in another language doesn't happen overnight. It takes time and practice, but with the right techniques, you'll get there.
Right, and speaking of techniques, another thing that works really well is to have conversations with yourself in English. It might sound funny, but talking to yourself in English is a great way to practice thinking in the language. For example, you can pretend you're ordering coffee at a cafe. Think to yourself, "I would like a coffee, please," or imagine how you would respond if someone asks, "How are you today?"
Yes, it's such a useful trick. It helps build your confidence because you're using English in real-life situations, even if it's just in your head. It's a way to practice without any pressure, and you can do it anywhere.
Exactly. Even when you're walking down the street, you can think, "It's sunny today," or "I'm going to the store now." These little exercises help train your mind to think in English more naturally.
And I think that's one of the most important things to remember. You don't need to be perfect. The goal is to make English a part of your daily thoughts. Even if it's just a few minutes each day, it really adds up over time.
Yes, Emma, that's such a good point. Thinking in English can seem hard at first, but with small steps, you'll notice that it becomes easier and more natural as you keep practicing.
So, Max, we've talked about how to start thinking in English by using simple words around us, describing what we see, and even having conversations with ourselves. But there's more we can do, right? There are other ways to push our thinking into English, even when it feels a bit difficult. What's another tip you think learners could use?
Oh, definitely. Another great tip is to read in English as much as possible. Reading helps your brain connect words and ideas without translating. And don't worry, you don't need to start with big novels or difficult articles. Start small, maybe with short stories, simple blogs, or news written in easy English. It's important to choose something you can understand so you don't get frustrated.
That's so true. It's tempting to want to challenge yourself with big books, but it's better to read things that match your level. When you read something too hard, it can be discouraging, and your brain wants to go back to translating every word. But when you read something easy, you can start understanding the whole sentence or the whole paragraph in English without translating. That's when real progress happens.
Yes, exactly. When you understand the general meaning of a text without thinking about it too much, it's a sign that your brain is learning to think in English. Another thing I love about reading is that it helps you see how sentences are formed. You can learn common expressions, new vocabulary, and how words are used in context. All this helps when you're trying to think in English because you're exposing your brain to natural English sentences.
And the more you read, the more you'll notice certain patterns in the language, like how words go together or how some sentences are structured. For example, you might notice how English speakers use words like "I think" or "I feel" to start sentences. Little by little, those patterns will start to become part of your thinking.
Yes, that's so important. When you read and hear these patterns, your brain starts to recognize them as normal. Instead of thinking, "How do I say this in English?" you just know it because you've seen and heard it so many times. This is called building your language intuition. It's like a sense or feeling for what sounds right in English.
That's such a great point. And something else that can help is to write in English. Now, I know some people might think, "Oh no, writing is too hard," but it doesn't have to be difficult. Just like speaking or thinking in English, writing is a skill you can practice, and it's another great way to train your brain to think in English.
Absolutely, Emma. Writing helps you slow down and really focus on how to express your thoughts in English. And again, it doesn't have to be long or perfect. You can start by writing simple sentences about your day. Maybe write a short diary entry at the end of each day, like, "Today, I went to the park and had ice cream." Little things like that make a big difference over time.
Yes, it can be something as simple as writing a few sentences about what you did or how you feel. For example, "I am tired today, but I had a good day at work." Or, "I watched a movie and it was fun." It's not about writing something complicated. It's about practicing putting your thoughts into English without translating.
That's right, and the best part about writing is that you can take your time. You don't have to rush like when you're speaking. You can stop and think, how do I say this in English? And try to find the best way to express yourself. Over time, this practice will help you get faster at thinking in English because you're training your brain to find the right words.
And the more you write, the more confident you'll become in your ability to think in English. It's like building a bridge in your brain at first. It takes time to cross from one language to another. But the more you practice, the shorter that bridge becomes, and eventually, you won't even notice you're crossing it. You'll just be thinking directly in English.
That's such a good way to think about it. Emma, the more you practice writing or speaking or even thinking in English, the more automatic it becomes. It's like when you learn to ride a bike at first, you have to think about every little move, but after a while, you just ride without thinking. That's how it is with thinking in English. It becomes natural with practice.
Exactly. And another thing that can really help is using English in everyday activities, even when you're not studying. Like when you're shopping or cooking, try to think about what you're doing in English. For example, if you're at the grocery store, you can think, I need to buy apples and bread. Or when you're cooking, you can think, I'm cutting vegetables now. These simple thoughts help you stay connected to the language all day.
Yes, that's such a good idea. It's about turning your normal routine into a way to practice English. Even if you're not in class or doing homework, you can still think in English, and it doesn't have to be perfect. It's okay if you don't know the exact word or if you make a mistake in your head. The important thing is to keep using English as much as possible.
That's such an important point. Making mistakes is part of learning, and it's totally normal. Don't worry if you're not thinking in perfect sentences all the time. The more you practice, the better you'll get. And speaking of practice, one more thing I want to mention is that it's really helpful to find a language partner or a group where you can practice speaking English regularly.
Oh, definitely. Having someone to practice with can really speed up your progress. When you talk to someone else in English, you're forced to think in the language because the conversation keeps moving. And even if you're not speaking perfectly, that back and forth interaction helps your brain stay in English mode.
Yes, and it can be really fun, too. You can talk about anything, your favorite food, your weekend plans, or even a TV show you watched. It's a great way to practice thinking in English in a real conversation. And you'll learn a lot from your partner as well.
And if you can't find a language partner, you can always practice online. There are so many websites and apps where you can chat with people in English. Or you can even record yourself speaking, listen to it, and think about how you could say things differently. It's all about getting used to thinking and speaking in English, no matter how you do it.
That's a great tip. Recording yourself is a really useful way to check your progress. When you listen to yourself, you can hear where you're doing well and where you need to improve. Plus, it's a great way to track how your thinking in English gets better over time.
And it's all about consistency. The more you practice, the better you'll get. Whether it's reading, writing, speaking, or just thinking, every little bit helps. The key is to make English part of your daily life, so it becomes more natural to think in the language.
Yes, and remember, it's a journey. Learning to think in English takes time, but every step you take brings you closer to fluency. So don't be afraid to make mistakes, and don't give up. Little by little, you'll get there.
Exactly, and the most important thing is to enjoy the process. When you're having fun with the language, you'll learn faster and feel more confident. So keep practicing, and soon you'll notice that thinking in English comes naturally. So, Emma, we've talked about a lot of great ways to start thinking in English. We've covered using simple words, describing our daily lives, writing, reading, and even finding someone to practice speaking with. But there's another key to thinking in English that we haven't discussed yet, and that's using English to express your feelings and ideas, not just facts. What do you think about that?
Oh, I completely agree, Max. It's so important to use English for more than just describing things around you. When you start using English to express your emotions or opinions, it really helps deepen your connection with the language. Instead of just saying, "This is a chair" or "I'm eating lunch," you can start to think about how you feel about things. For example, "I love this movie" or "I'm excited about tomorrow."
Yes, exactly. Thinking about your feelings in English can really help make the language feel more personal. And it can be a lot more fun, too. For instance, you can practice by asking yourself questions like, "How do I feel right now?"
And when you do that, you're also learning new vocabulary. Emotions and opinions are a big part of everyday conversations, so knowing how to express them in English is super useful. You don't need to know every word, but learning how to say things like happy, sad, worried, or excited will help you think in English much more naturally.
That's so true, and it's not just about emotions either. You can also start thinking in English when you have decisions to make. For example, if you're trying to choose what to eat for lunch, you can think, "Do I want a sandwich or a salad, or which one is healthier?" By making decisions in English, even small ones, you're training your brain to think in the language in real-life situations.
Yes, I love that idea. Every little decision you make can be a chance to practice thinking in English. Whether you're deciding what clothes to wear, what book to read, or even what time to go to bed, you can practice thinking through the options in English. And because these decisions are part of your daily life, it becomes more natural over time.
Exactly, and here's another tip: try to challenge yourself by thinking about why you make certain choices. For example, don't just think, "I want to wear this shirt today." You can also ask yourself, "Why do I want to wear this shirt?" Or "How will this shirt make me feel today?" These kinds of deeper questions help you think in more complete sentences, which is really important for fluency.
That's such a good point, Max. Asking yourself why and how questions in English helps you think beyond just simple phrases. You're using the language in a more thoughtful way, which makes your thinking in English much stronger. Plus, it helps prepare you for more complex conversations in the future, when you might need to explain your thoughts or feelings to someone else.
Yes, and you know, another great way to practice thinking in English is through storytelling. You can make up a short story in your head in English, or even try to tell a story about something that happened to you. For example, you can think, "Yesterday, I went to the park and I saw a dog playing with a ball." It doesn't have to be long or complicated, but storytelling is a fantastic way to practice.
Oh, I love that. Telling stories, even simple ones, forces you to connect ideas in English, which is great for fluency. You can practice telling stories about your day, your plans, or even something from your past. And if you don't know how to say a word, you can always work around it and use words you do know. That's a great way to train your brain to think in English without getting stuck.
Exactly, and that's another important point. Don't worry if you don't know every word in English. It's totally fine to use simple language to explain what you mean. If you can't think of the word for restaurant, for example, you can just say "the place where I eat food." The goal is to keep thinking in English, even if you don't have a perfect vocabulary yet.
Right. The more you focus on using the language, even with basic words, the easier it will become over time. And as you learn more words, your thinking will get faster and more natural. It's a process, and every little bit helps. Another thing that really helps me is using English in different situations. For example, if I'm learning a new language, I'll try to use it not just at home, but also when I'm out shopping, meeting friends, or even thinking about my plans for the weekend.
Yes, using English in different contexts really helps because you're practicing how to think in the language in different situations. Whether you're talking to someone, planning your day, or even just thinking about your favorite hobby, you can practice using English in all kinds of settings. And the more you do that, the more comfortable you'll get.
Exactly. And I think that brings us to an important point. It's really about creating an English environment for yourself. Even if you're not in an English-speaking country, you can surround yourself with English through music, TV shows, books, podcasts, and conversations. The more English you hear and use in your daily life, the easier it will be to start thinking in English automatically.
That's such a great tip, Emma. You don't have to wait until you're in a classroom to practice English. You can create your own little English world. Maybe you listen to an English song on your way to work, or you watch a short English video while you eat lunch. These small habits can make a huge difference in how quickly you start thinking in English.
Exactly. The more you immerse yourself in English, the faster your brain will adapt. And don't forget to enjoy the process. Learning to think in a new language can be fun, especially when you find things you love, like watching your favorite shows or listening to your favorite music in English. It makes the whole experience more enjoyable.
That's such good advice, Emma. Enjoying the journey is really important. Learning a new language, especially thinking in that language, is a big achievement and it takes time. But when you make it part of your daily life and keep practicing, you'll see progress. Little by little, you'll start noticing that thinking in English feels easier and more natural.
Absolutely. And remember, everyone learns at their own pace. Some people might take longer, and that's okay. The key is to stay consistent and keep practicing. Even if you only spend a few minutes each day thinking in English, it all adds up. And soon, you'll find yourself thinking in English without even trying.
Yes, that's so true. It's all about practice and patience. So, if you're learning English and trying to think in the language, just keep going. Use the tips we've talked about, like describing your day, writing, reading, listening, and practicing your emotions and decisions in English. Over time, you'll see real improvement.
And don't forget to have fun with it. Learning to think in English is such an exciting part of your language journey. The more you enjoy the process, the more motivated you'll be to keep going. So stay positive, keep practicing, and you'll get there.
Absolutely. And with that, we want to thank everyone for listening today. We hope these tips help you on your journey to thinking in English and improving your fluency.
Yes, thank you so much for joining us. Remember, if you found this episode helpful, please subscribe to our channel and share it with your family and friends. The more people we can help with learning English, the better.
And don't forget to leave a comment below and let us know how you're practicing thinking in English. We'd love to hear your tips and experiences.
Definitely. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time. Bye for now.
Goodbye, everyone.